So is that Dan or Barrett asking me to wait, or are we ready to go?
Just give us a moment. We're almost ready.
Oh, sorry. All right.
Yeah, we're getting the recording all set up.
Gotcha.
For those of you who haven't met Robert, he's the Public Information Officer for the City of Maitland and helps us with all of our live streaming as well as a number of other very important duties.
He's the guy with a nice camera too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to be nice to him because we're going to start recording all the meetings in the council chambers, and he controls the camera angles and everything. So you got to be real nice to him.
All right.
All right, we're ready to go.
All right. Well, good afternoon and welcome to the City of Maitland Planning and Zoning Workshop for Thursday, August the 6th. So I want to share, as a result of the COVID-19 outbreak and resulting social distancing and prohibitions on large group meetings, and out of abundance of caution, we're having this meeting electronically through online video communications. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, through Executive Order 20-69, allowed for online government meetings. Participants do not need to be physically present as long as sunshine law requirements are met. Members of the Planning and Zoning Commission and other city staff are present via online video through smartphone, tablet, or computer. Residents and stakeholders can watch the meeting live on YouTube via a link provided on the city website. All right. So at this time, we are going to call to order the Planning and Zoning Commission workshop for Thursday, August 6th, 2020. Before we do the roll call, I do want to introduce our new member. Glenn Jaffe is joining our group. He's one of the commissioners. So Glenn, if you want to, I'll offer you a couple of moments to share a little bit about yourself, if you'd like to.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Again, Glenn Jaffe. I grew up here in Maitland. I've raised my kids. They went to the same schools I did. I grew up over on Lake Catherine. Moved as far away as College Park out of college. And then as I started to have my own family, came all the way back to Maitland, of which, 20 years ago, I went to one of my first city meetings and was so excited about the master plan and everything we were doing, and have been actively participating, hoping to achieve all the things that it laid out. So not all of those things have always gone as planned. And I think I've appreciated even the knowledge I've gained so far by when you see the land development code and the assessment to get us here. It makes so much sense. So I'm looking forward. I thought I could be a good participant in the audience over the last 20 years. And now maybe I can also contribute from sitting, I used to say behind the desk, but now I'll say sitting in front of the camera with the rest of you all. So nice to meet you.
Well, welcome, Glenn, and glad to have you.
Don't forget you've read the document twice already before tonight.
And I still showed up to the meeting.
All right, can we get a roll call?
Yeah, I would be happy to. Commissioner Jaffe.
Present, if that's what I'm supposed to say.
Sure. Commissioner McIver.
Here.
Commissioner Lamb.
Here.
Vice Chair Bennett.
Present.
Chairman Holloway.
Here. All right, so the first item we have on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. These are the minutes for July 16th, 2020. Are there any comments on the minutes? If no comments, could I have a motion?
So moved.
Ooh.
Second.
I don't.
This virtual time lag, unmuting as quickly as possible thing is going to be fun.
Yeah, just for clarification, I'm assuming that motion was to approve the minutes as drafted.
It was.
Okay.
And was that, for the record, was that Commissioner McIver or that buzzed in first?
I think I made the motion and she seconded.
Thank Thank you
Yep.
for
We
the
may have to go to the
clarification.
tape for an instant replay.
Yeah.
Robert, can you do an instant replay on that in slow motion?
All right. Can we get a
Thank
vote?
you. Oh, now I need a vote, I guess.
Yes, can we get a vote?
Oh, that's
Uh,
Commissioner Jaffe,
you gonna need that?
Aye.
Commissioner MacGyver,
Aye.
Commissioner Lamb,
Aye.
Vice Chair Bennett,
Aye.
Chairman Holloway.
Aye.
All right. Rolling right along. Sorry, this is a little surreal doing this at my desk, but we'll get it done.
I think you're picking on Commissioner Jaffe because he's new and you're making him make the first vote. He doesn't know what he's doing yet.
Right. I take y'all's word for it. They were all correct.
We're in a reverse order of seniority is how we're doing it.
All right, so the first, actually our main item for today is our workshop associated with the Land Development Code update. For this meeting, we're addressing Module 1. Module 1 is Articles 1 and 3. Basically, what I'm looking at is we'll start off sort of going page by page, and I'll ask each one if you have comments on that page. If we have comments, we'll collect those and take a poll before we leave the page. If those are comments we want to keep to move forward, we'll do that poll by show of hands. And then as we go to the next page, or if we find that we don't need to do page by page, we'll adjust the rhythm, but we'll start off that way. And then also just to remind you that this workshop is it's collecting those comments and questions that we have that we want to push forward. So we're not doing an official recommendation today. That's just we're going to have a multi-session process building up the comments for the plan. And then we will gather all these together and at some future date do a formal recommendation. One thing to keep in mind as we go through this, we may find as we move into other modules that there might be something we need to go back and revisit a comment so I just want to make sure we have the ability to do that, and we may find we need to as we get more informed about something in a future module. All right, so do we have some level of presentation or do we dive right into it?
Yeah.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I have a bit of
Barrett's actually going to.
Sorry, go ahead, Dan. I have a bit of an introduction, but Dan, were you going to talk a little bit about Zoom etiquette first? Okay, and then I do have a little bit of an introduction, just not lengthy. It's not a presentation per se. It's more of just a warm up to kind of get our minds all in the same place regarding what we're trying to accomplish.
So before we get started, just to let everybody know that the city is developing a Zoom etiquette kind of policy, but just wanted to give you a heads up as we move forward. We didn't really have one in place last meeting because it was kind of really quickly done, but keep in mind that we ask if you could sign on about 5 or 10 minutes before the meeting. We usually start the live link about 10 to 15 minutes before the meeting. That way we don't have any hangups. Also, if you need to eat something on camera, just turn your video off for a brief second while you chew and eat, and then turn it back on. Drinking is fine. If you have a cup or something like that, that's fine. Just keep in mind that you are on camera and this is live stream. So also try not to talk over others. I know it's really difficult with Zoom, especially because some of us have lags, especially those of us that have wonderful internet service out in the country. But one thing that's easy to do is just kind of keep your mic muted until you want to speak or ask to speak or whatever, if you have a comment. That way, if there are noises in the background, whether it be kids or spouses or gunshots or whatever it may be, it doesn't disrupt the rest of the meeting. So just a good thing to keep in mind. We will be having a policy come out probably prior to the next P&Z meeting, which is only a couple weeks away. And with that, Barrett, take it away.
All right, thank you, Dan. Yeah, so just real briefly, I know most of us have been here through this whole process, but not all of us. So I thought I'd do a quick kind of refresher about where we are in the overall process. Could everybody see the screen that I'm sharing right now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is the overall task of updating the LDC, the kind of the flow chart. We are about halfway through task 3, which is drafting of the land development code. You know, as you are all aware, we finished the downtown portion of it, and now this is the start of module 1, which will be followed by actually 2 more modules, module 2 and module 3. So this is a real important milestone where it is now kind of the start of planning and zoning reviewing the bulk of the land development code. So we're all really excited. Where we've gone so far is Clarion and staff at Maitland, we've really spent quite a bit of time, like hundreds of hours, drafting this and commenting on it and discussing the contents of it, so that by the time you get it, it's by no means perfect, but it should be at least coherent. There shouldn't be a ton of mistakes, and it should hopefully make sense at least. And our job really, the Planning and Zoning Commission, is now to perfect it, make and help us achieve our goals. So I thought this was kind of useful to go back to the assessment and kind of touch back on what we were trying to do with this overall code update. And that's to create a user-friendly code, implement the comprehensive plan. This is the big one that we're going to hit on today, is modernize, simplify, and tailor the zone districts to implement the comprehensive development plan and achieve other community goals. So kind of we are going to look at, module 1 consists of 4 articles, and we're going to look at the first 2 of them today. So article 1 is really about what the code applies to. It's not very, I would say, not very important in the day-to-day application of the code by staff, but it's very important in court if we were to be legally challenged about the relevancy of the code or who it applies to. And fortunately, our consultants are all attorneys, land use attorneys, and so they have good expertise in that. I imagine kind of the most interesting part of today's discussion is going to be in Article 3, where we lay out the new zone districts. Right now, in our current code, we have 24 zone districts in the current regulations. That's 20 base districts, 1 floating district, 1 planned development district, and 2 overlay districts. So out of those 20 base districts, a whopping 12 of them are residential districts. So in Article 3, what we've done is proposed to do is take those 24 districts and simplify them, streamline them, break them down into only 12 zone districts, which even social scientists math shows that's 50% reduction of zone districts. So basically every 2 that exist now, make them into 1. And so that breaks down into 5 residential, 3 mixed use, 2 non-residential, and 2 planned developments. And so kind of as a general rule, when we were combining these districts, taking 24 and breaking them into 12, generally, in most cases, they were very similar already. And when we when we combined them, we kind of applied tended to apply the less restrictive development standards are kept. And so that reduces the non-conformities, as you see, because we don't want, if you combine them and make the more restrictive development standards apply, then, the ones that were in the less restrictive one are all of a sudden now non-conforming. They have too small setbacks, et cetera, et cetera. So we tried to avoid that. And so basically we're really excited. My role tonight is I'm going to be taking notes, and like Chairman mentioned, you can take a straw poll to make sure that there's some sort of consensus on them. If we don't finish tonight, or if you get exhausted, get tired, throw in the towel, that's fine. We're going to be meeting again in 2 weeks. We just pick up where we left off, but hopefully, we can maybe get through Articles 1 and Article 3 and our comments on that. And we're really interested to hear everybody's thoughts on what we've drafted so far.
All right, thank you, Barrett. So are there any comments before we get to page 1-1?
Yeah, can I ask a quick kind of overarching question that might help guide
Sure.
my sharing of comments? So, was there any effort done to kind of document or the comparisons or the differences between the old and the new relative to, at least as it relates to section 3, Barrett?
Yes, there were. Those are in the code assessment documents. Actually, I believe on page 29, they broke down which of the existing districts went into the new districts. And also that's done in the footnotes. So in each part, when you go through Article 3 in each zone district, in the footnotes, it'll tell you which 2 of the districts it'll combine, if they are in fact 2 districts.
Yeah,
and actually, this might be helpful too. I mean, Matt, so this shows the existing
right
24 districts, and then we, if we want to, this, this would show
So Matt,
where
what
the new districts are.
Go ahead, Dan. I'm sorry.
So basically in the section, Article 1, section 1.8, it talks about all the existing zoning districts and how they were condensed into what they are today, or what they're proposed. It's got all the zoning districts and how we put it in there. When it came to the standards of each of those districts, we took into consideration the existing use, what the existing zoning was of today, and built in enough flexibility, but yet still held it to where none of the changes would be that big of a discrepancy. We're not telling someone that you used to have a 50-foot setback and now you can build to the property line, things like that.
Yeah, fair enough. And I guess that, so yeah, and that's a good point. You bring up section 1.8. So this was kind of my second part of my question that's kind of related, and maybe I should have asked it the other way around, but irregardless. So it seems like there are some things that are in there via footnote. And as I recall from our review of the downtown district, that there were a lot of footnotes that were in there really for review purposes, right, for our effort, but that will be removed upon completion of the LDC. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And so I'm
the footnotes are
consistent with what we're talking about here as well, right?
Yes, that's right.
Correct.
For the most part, the footnotes, as you can see on the screen, such as 11, 12, 13, those will go away.
Yeah.
Other footnotes that are kind of incorporated in the table will stay, but these textual footnotes are just for understanding where some of the text came from, whether it's old LDC or new.
All right, fair enough. Yeah, no, this is good. You answered my question. We can proceed. There may be a few things that I question as we get through, just because I had put it in my notes as I was reviewing it, but you helped probably eliminate a lot of what I was going to provide input on or question on, so all good.
No, thank you. Those are excellent questions, and I think that's actually a great idea. Does anybody else have any kind of more general overall comments or questions before we get started? Right, like on page 1.
I would ask, can we get that map? Because that wasn't in the book, and I think it would be helpful just to get bearings, get some bearings.
Sure. Would you like the existing zoning map?
I mean,
I think both of those might be helpful, because I was sort of tracking in the footnotes, comparing, but I didn't have the new one.
So the reason you don't have the new map, it's my fault. I didn't want to release it because it is so broadly conceptual right now. However, staff put a lot of time into putting it to make the districts match where they should be, where they could be based on what's existing. But it is so draft format that I didn't want it to get out to the public because it's way too early in the process. However, we're happy to release it to you. Just please don't broadcast it because it's very, very draft format.
And I mean, essentially, it's just a direct translation. It hasn't been vetted at all. It's basically just a straight one-to-one. If it's in, for example, if it's RS1 and RS1A, we just colored it RSF1, right? So there's been no checking to make sure it's appropriate. It's just, but that's what it would look like. So I can kind of, can everybody read the legend to the map, or should I read it out loud?
So one thing on when Dan, if you didn't want to release that other one, if somebody could just go in there and create a sort of bracketed legend, sort of showing them, like I went in and I took the old one and said RSF-1, and that brackets around RS2 and RS-1 and RS-1A. It seems like it's not much changed. It's just sort of showing us what is the difference.
Yeah, that's right. That's also table,
there wasn't
like Dan said, 181 too, if you want to refer to that. The zone district in previous LDC and the zone district in this LDC. And it's broken down into the residential, mixed use, and non-residential. So that's on page 4 of Article 1.
Okay.
And we could probably share that through the Zoom chat feature so that you all can pull it up if need be. We'll have to get that loaded real quick, but we can do that as we're moving along. The zoning districts, a lot of them, you're right, Chairman, a lot of them were just straight conversions. We didn't really mess a whole lot with the single family as far as those should match pretty much what's out there now. Some of the newer ones that weren't in part of the zoning district, like the West Side and the MX district, that's the kind of the new things, and I think we'll get that as we move through the rest of Article 1, 3, and then next week on to 2 and 4, or 2 weeks.
Yeah, I do want to point out while we're on the topic that this Article 3 isn't entirely complete. You guys probably noticed that there was a placeholder for the West Side district. So the consultants and staff are still working on that one. So that will, obviously still be a part of it. And also, we're going to have an overlay district for carrying forward. We're kind of preliminarily calling it the, arts and culture overlay, where it takes some of the development standards from the cultural corridor and carries them forward, because the cultural corridor zoning district in this draft is proposing to go away, but we need to keep, per the comprehensive plan, we need to keep and maintain some of those limitations on floor area ratio and height and things like that.
All right, so can we move on, or were there any other general questions? All right, so starting, any comments on any of the preface information before we get to 1-1? All right, any comments on 1-2, or was there anything on 1-1?
Hold on. Here we go. At the end you say the code. Is that appropriate? It just seems like that could be consistent with other, like, building code or something like that. Is that a proper terminology to refer, that this could be referred to as the code?
Matt, where are you referencing that? Is that at the top there?
Hold on,
Section
I got
1.1.
like 6 things open. I apologize. I'm switching around so many different things. So
I think
yeah, I'm sorry, you said section 1.1 we were on. And so I was just at the last bit of that sentence within that section. You know, it gives some different terms or references that the LDC could be referred to as. And the last one is this code. I just didn't know if that, I mean, I don't know. I don't know that it matters. It just seemed kind of odd that that would be such a generic term that would be made reference to this document.
Well, I think its use is just referring to the code as itself, as the LDC as itself, really. I mean, that terminology doesn't go outside of this document.
Oh, okay. All right. Fair enough. Fair enough.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know that I necessarily get that from that language, but I'll take it. If that were the case, and then it's just and may be referred to herein as this, or this, but it doesn't say that. Again, not a big deal. I don't want to keep going.
Yeah, I guess I'm not following, because it does say up there, you know, after they give the specific name, then it says and may be referred to as the Maitland Land Development Code.
I think Matt's saying that it should say and may be referred to herein as the Maitland Land Development Code.
Elsewhere, when they say this code, they're not necessarily referring to the land development code. Okay.
Could be the Code of Ordinances.
That's true.
So you're saying it should say and may be referred to herein as.
I think what my concern is, right, is it seems to be pretty obvious that if you're in the code and you're making a reference to this code, that's pretty self-explanatory. I mean, the sentence starts off this way, this code. That's a pretty common interpretation. But the way I'm seeing this is that other documents or other things outside of this code could make reference to this as, instead of saying the Land Development Code of the City of Maitland, Florida, they could say the Maitland Land Development Code, the Maitland LDC, or the LDC. That all seems to be pretty referable to this particular document. But outside of this document, to make reference to this code just doesn't seem to make sense. But
Well, I think
what
I see your point.
What that is saying is that there's sections in the code as we get further along that will say this use may be permitted unless stated otherwise in this code. And so that's where it's referring to, that it's in other areas of this code, it refers to this code.
Okay. Good deal. That's all good. I'm sorry. I was a little eager beaver at the beginning of reading this, so my comments drop off at the end, so I apologize.
Well, I do.
Don't drop them. Keep them coming.
I'm not sure who made the suggestion to add herein after it says referred to. I mean, that makes it specific that whatever we're saying here is specific to this document.
But what about in staff reports or
Yeah,
like
exactly.
That's fine. I'll rescind my suggestion.
All righty. Anything else on this page? Page 1-2. How about 1-3?
Hey, can I'm sorry, I had a 1.2.
Okay.
When it says application to governmental units, I'm kind of confused a little bit by the provisions of this LDC shall apply to development and redevelopment by any county, the Orange County Public Schools, the state of Florida and its agencies, and the federal government and its agencies and departments to the extent allowed by law within the city limits, correct?
Correct. If the county owns land or the federal government owns land or another county happens to own land or something like that in the city limits and want to do development, then this code shall apply unless they're exempted by, well, we will utilize this code to the best extent of the law. There are certain things like the post office that is completely exempt from our rules, and depending on who the postmaster is in the city you live in, they could work with you or they could say, we do what we want.
Right. Right. I guess other than the schools, do we have any, I mean, just out of curiosity, do we have any of that situation? I know Orange County Public School owns the school property, which is within the city limits, but do we know if we have?
We have some property that's owned by the city of Eatonville in our jurisdiction.
Oh, okay.
And Orange County does. I know we've land swapped with Winter Park. I don't know if they own any land left anymore, but that's probably all I can think of right now.
So should we make reference to any other city as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, it wouldn't hurt.
Okay.
I think at this point, the only thing that Eatonville has is the cemetery.
Oh, okay. Well, fair enough.
So is everyone in occurrence? That's a valid comment for 1-2? Raise hands.
We can't see the hands because of the screen.
Looks like Matt's
being
camera's
shared.
off, maybe.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Right, and there's
my hand's up. Sorry.
Okay. All right.
Matt wouldn't even raise his own hand for his own comment. I see.
Oh boy, it's gonna be a long night.
All right. How about 1-3?
Hey, I had another one on 1.2. Emergency exemption. Does that apply? Would that apply for a permanent situation, or is that just for a temporary condition?
those are temporary conditions. In the case where the governor or the mayor declares a state of emergency, we allow ourselves to exempt from certain procedures and things.
Right.
It's common. We do it like during hurricanes, then we waive all building permit fees for repairs. In a case where, for instance, in a case where the pandemic comes in and restaurants and stuff were closed, we may want to exempt some of the rules and say you can now put tables out in the street or out in a parking lot since you can't have them indoors, stuff like that. It just gives us a little bit of flexibility during emergency, but they are all temporary emergencies.
And so we don't have to make the statement that that would be temporary. I mean, it could be pretty reasonably assumed that it is temporary, but I just wonder if somebody could take advantage of that and get a quote unquote temporary exemption that then never kind of reverts back to applying to the actual code that should be applicable.
I have a suggestion. So the footnote refers to the Florida statute, which kind of, I think, outlines that. Do you think we should make reference to that Florida statute in the, because that, you're right, because once that footnote goes away, then that clarification won't be there.
Well, the exemption would only apply during the declared emergency, and the declared emergencies have to have a time frame. Now, the governor can extend it or the mayor can extend it, but they always have a definitive deadline.
Okay.
So should we say during a declared emergency?
We can. It won't hurt at all. I would make it. I think the Florida statute recognizes that, but I think we can. It wouldn't hurt to say declared by the mayor or governor, or I guess the county chairman could declare a county-wide state of emergency.
Well, this says the city council may authorize city agencies. Okay. During a declared emergency, provisions of this lead during a declared emergency, does that fix it?
I think it wouldn't hurt to say, because generally it's the governor that declares it, or the mayor. The mayor will do a proclamation, a quick resolution proclamation of a state of emergency.
Okay, so I'm just asking for the specific wording that you want to insert. Is it sufficient just to say declared, or do you want something more than that?
I would say declared by the mayor or governor.
Mayor or governor.
Okay.
Garrett, is there any way that you can make these comments directly onto the page so we can see to get towards the end and reviewing all of the comments? It might be a little easier.
Why he's doing that, if you guys go to the chat feature, the map is loaded up on the chat.
Thank you.
It might be, I wonder if I could just do something like this, because I don't really know. I don't know if I can sort of
want to put the note, it should pop up like add comment.
Add sticky note.
Yeah, or you can go up across the top and you see the little box with the T in it right there. You could at least add the comments. You'll know right where they're going. You can pull that box down into the document.
Right. Oh, here?
Yep. Just click that and
that's a text box.
Anywhere. Yeah.
I can also
not a cut and paste, but
right. You can add a sticky note like this. Does that work?
Yes.
And as we collect these comments over the course of the next several meetings, we will have a cleaner kind of strike through underline-ish. We'll incorporate them into the document.
No, that's a good idea. Does that work? Can people actually read that on the shared screen, or is that too small?
Now it's small.
I can read it.
Yeah, and then to do it as the notes, I think there's a way you can see all of the notes in the whole document. Maybe at the end if we need to look through it or something.
Okay. Or I could always just save it and then transfer them back into a Word document or something too for distribution. But, okay.
Thank you.
No problem.
Is everybody concur that's acceptable comment to our document? Show of hands. I saw hands. All right, we're good.
I had a question. I didn't realize Matt had jumped ahead to 1.4. I had a question on 1.3. And I didn't find anything in the section 10 in the back, or article 10, which if you look at anything from 1.36 all the way down, it says a high quality design. And it keeps referring to a high quality of design or high. And what is going to be the definition of that? Because you've got a whole section that refers to high quality of design, but there's no definition of it.
Kathleen, are you on section 1.3 or page 1.4?
I'm on page 1.
She's on section.
But it's section 1.3, 5.6, 0.7, 0.8, 0.9.
Yeah. The answer is that it's not defined, but there are going to be design guidelines that certain non-residential buildings are going to have to follow, which will lead to a high quality design. That's can be found in Article 5, which has some of the design standards in it. So I think that's kind of what that's speaking to, is it's where we start kind of similar to in the downtown, where we talked about orientation of buildings, prohibited materials, certain kinds of facade requirements, roof requirements. That's I think what that's referring to.
And also keep in mind that section 1.3 is just really a general purpose statement. It's the intent of this code is to bring together a better design and quality. It's a very general statement of intent.
And I mean, I get what the intent is, but again, just looking at it as from 30,000 feet, it's like, so what's the definition of that? And what are the expectations as the city? What are we expecting people to do for high quality of design? Because what my definition of high quality is, and your definition, it's very, I mean, that's very subjective, because, is it a trailer, or is it a manufactured home, or is it you see what I'm saying? I mean, everybody has a different quality.
Article 5, right. I get a lot to argue about that, because that's where the rubber meets the road on what we are going to prohibit and what we're going to not only prohibit, but also what we're going to require in terms of quality of design, and where that line actually looks. And because it is, I agree, it is fairly subjective, but that's the kind of consensus that we want to try to reach. And so, I mean, I don't think you can say, I mean, you could define, I don't know that I personally don't think that having a definition of quality design gets us there, but there's going to be entire sections of the code where we lay out that vision and can argue about the details. Yeah. But I agree.
So then do we need reference to those, articles or sections or whatever we're calling it?
I think this section is the general purpose and statement. It's just laying out what we want this code to do. As we get into the future modules and articles, it's going to define what it means by high quality design. And that's where, as Barrett was saying, when we get into that article, that's how we want the city to look as we move forward. So that's where everyone's input from staff to P&Z to council is going to help shape exactly what we want to see.
So I
think it be architectural, whether it be whatever.
Yeah, because when you get into the detail, you start talking about the materials and how the buildings and orientations and different things that, I view this as just, this is sort of our goal or mission statement, and then the details elsewhere. I agree that, that's a broad term, but I think as we get into the details, we just start defining what materials and expectation, that sort of frames it a little better. I work in an office, I could ask that question of 50 people and I'd get 50 answers. In this, this context.
And that's why I was asking the question, because you could have 50 opinions.
That opinion will be determined by all of our recommendations moving forward and in council's ultimate vote on the adoption of whatever it turns out to be in the end. But I think if we try to define every purpose statement, we probably won't get very far tonight. Okay. They're meant to be very general and set this tone for the later articles that will define what we all form this code to be.
Kathleen, if it brings you any comfort, we had the same conversation when we did the comprehensive plan about a year ago. And I completely agree with you. And I think from what I understand from what Barrett and Dan are saying is that's forthcoming. So, I feel the same way, and kind of something I latch on to because it's not specifically defined. So how could we interpret that? You're leaving it up to the interpretation of so many different people, from residents to professionals. So when that language is available. I guess this is a warning that we'll be going through it with a fine tooth comb.
Yeah, I also like to, clarify, like, I think my role, I'm always trying to kind of explain our perspective from staff and try to represent the consultants and represent kind of what our explanation. I'm in no way trying to argue against any of your recommendations. I'm just trying to give trying to provide an explanation of what we had in mind. So I certainly don't mean to come across as argumentative or adversarial, just trying to provide context.
Understand. Kathleen, do you have anything else on 1.2 or 1-2, the page?
No, I'm good.
How about page 1-3? I'm going to move to 1-4. So I have a question on 1-4, and I noticed this throughout the document. At section paragraph 1.8.1, transition to new zone districts, we have several placeholders for putting the effective date in. Is there not a way to capture that one time? I think I haven't got through the whole document yet, but we probably are trying to stick that in there, 100 times.
Yes and no. Some dates are a little bit different. Most of them will be on the effective date of the adoption, but there's some things that you may have, and we'll get to this as we get later in the section. You'll have a structure built prior to X date, not necessarily the adoption of this, but there may be different dates depending on the standard and what had previous agreements, previous development agreements, or things that were annexed into the city have certain standards that they get to keep with them. So we'll have in some sections where it'll say any development that was annexed or brought into the city before X date. So that's why certain standards will only apply to when it's adopted versus some have preset dates.
Yeah, I'll look for those differences, but everyone I thought I saw just said insert effective date of this LDC.
It does.
And a lot of them are.
A
lot of them are.
From a legal point of view, I think it kind of establishes the cutoff between, conforming and legal non-conforming. So or non-conforming things. So if it was, that's kind of important. I tend to defer to the land use attorneys why it does seem repetitive. We definitely saw that a lot in the downtown portion as well, but it's legally, it's fairly important to demarcate before and after the code was adopted for, establishing the legality of a structure and et cetera, and a use.
Okay. The lawyers.
I have a comment on 1.7.2 of this section, or of this page rather. Is there any way that we can, we make a comment that it's, shall be incorporated by reference and is on file, but is there perhaps any way that we can put like a link in here to where that map would be located, or make it easier for people to find it? Seems kind of difficult. Does not seem to make it easy for people to find the map.
Yeah, so there's a couple different things. One of them, we can't, obviously put a hyperlink in a printed version. In the electronic version, we can, and we will. Mm-hmm. We tend to, generally, a lot of zoning codes tend to not hyperlink it to the document, because anytime a zone changes, then you have to go change the hyperlink to the zoning map. Okay. If you're going in and redoing the map. Right. In most places, they have the official zoning map, which is considered the official paper copy on file, kept within planning department or community development in this case, or whatever. It's not to say we can't do it, especially in a PDF version that's online, provided it's done in a way that allows us to comply with all the ADA requirements.
Oh yeah, good point. Good point. Yeah, good point. My bad.
Anything else on 1-4 from anyone? About page 1-5.
I had a question on 1.5 on the, when you see not the comment about non-conformities, are there examples of this? Like, do we think by this new code, we're going to create a lot of non-conformities, or is there just some rare occasion?
I think
so. Yes.
Anytime you change a code, depending on the extent to which you modify it from the old code, you will create a certain amount of nonconformities, right? Like just taking the uses, for example, like anytime you change any uses, as long as that any use you take away that's in existence becomes non-conforming. But we tried to minimize this. As I discussed when we combined the zone districts, we tried to avoid nonconformities because while they're somewhat inevitable, I think it's possible to try to minimize that by not making things more restrictive or less restrictive. Or things to keep in mind, but I guess the short answer to your question is yes, there will be nonconformities created. It's somewhat inevitable whenever you change something that's in existence, but we can try to keep that in mind to try to minimize that.
I only asked just because in it referenced Article 8 nonconformities, but I'm not sure I could find that reference. But just so, what do you do? Are these majors or minors? That just as a group, do you make sure that you're communicating to a particular property owner, like this is happening, or?
I agree.
So as Barrett was saying, anytime you change an ordinance, you're going to have nonconformities, whether it be a use that used to be allowed and is no longer allowed, or a setback that has changed. And as Barrett was saying, is when we created at least the residential ones, we try to, this new code is actually more flexible. It's not going to make it any stricter for people. It's actually going to loosen up the regulations quite a bit. So the nonconformities will be minimal in a case like that. When it comes to uses or things that were built to maybe a certain height that's been lowered or anything like that, there will be some nonconformities. Now, as far as the public, after we get through these 3 modules, we start going through the public hearing process. We do notify, we put ads in the paper, we notify residents, we do quarter-page ads, we do all sorts of advertisement on the website and social media. So we get the word out. We have a public hearing through Planning and Zoning Board. The DRC has a public hearing and council has 2 public hearings. So we get the word out as much as we can and give people every opportunity to know that their land is changing. And in this case, because the zoning districts are changing, we will likely notify every resident in the city because something is changing within their district.
Glenn, if you're asking kind of in general what happens with nonconformities, people are usually able to maintain those as long as they want, and fix them up, upkeep them, maintain them. It's just if the use goes away or the structure goes away for any particular period of time, or they were to demolish it, they could not build it back in that exact way.
Yeah, and hey, I've been part of this is in the city, so you're just sometimes sensitive to make sure, like, what does fixing it up mean? Can I go change out my windows, or can I, if I paint, is that okay? And I don't have any specific examples. I just was highlighting that I wanted to make sure we're not creating more issues.
Well, it's a great thing to keep in mind. Yeah. We'll be able to definitely dig into the details when we get to Article 8, which I think is going to be coming in Module 3. But again,
you'll love this.
Keith said we're going to go back and look at the entire document again as a whole, because it's hard to review it in a piecemeal fashion. Once you have it all again, we'll go back and look at it and make sure it all makes sense together.
And the answer to your question, Glenn, is I'm sure you'll probably hear this a lot tonight, is that it's coming up in a future element of, or a future section and element of the code. We do talk about non-conformities and what repairs you can and can't do until you have to start bringing it up to certain standards or bringing it up to the new standards. And as well, Glenn, you weren't here at the downtown adoption, but there were certain things that if you repaired a certain percentage, you only had to follow X new rules. If you did so much more, you had to follow more rules. So it's set up in a way where we don't amortize any uses or anything. We just say that if you're grandfathered, you can stay as it is. You can do repairs, you can change things out as long as you don't expand a legal non-conforming use over a certain percent. At that point, then you have to start bringing it up to the new code.
Okay, I mean, look, that was just a comment. We can move on. I can already see we have no chance of getting through this whole thing.
I'm still confident we're going to make it through.
We're gonna gain speed here shortly. How about any more on 1-5? So how about on page 1-6? (1-7).
Picking up speed already.
So I do have a question on 1-7. You know, it lists out the 9 conditions that are basically grandfathered in, and it says, under D, it says, and conditions of the development shall be considered to be in conformance with the terms of this LDC. So
what that is these 9 developments have very specific development orders or development agreements. And so what this is saying is that those things are carried forward as to the agreements that were done at the time they were adopted.
So we're saying that there's probably things about them that are non-conforming to this LDC, but we're grandfathering them in, thus making them compliant.
Yes, you'll notice that they're all in downtown, in downtown Maitland, and that's where a lot of the times the development orders come into place. And so we wanted to make sure that we weren't, and these were all, I believe, most created in the last 10 or 15 years under the old downtown regulations. So we just wanted to make sure that we weren't, that this was a necessary step to make sure we didn't, contradict the own development orders that we signed, which were a little different when things are developed under a development agreement than when they're just developed under the general code. So that's why that we carved those kind of exceptions out.
But that doesn't mean that if these properties get redeveloped, would they fall back under this land development, or would they maintain?
Yes, it's only if they continue to be compliant with the improved terms and conditions of the development. So that's when, if they're no longer like that, then and if they want to change it, they would have to go in through the minor change or major change section of that code. So that's right. It's only they can continue under their terms of their developers agreement. Okay. Good question.
Could we perhaps reference the development agreement rather than just the project name? I think.
The name of the development agreement is typically the address and the project name. So if you mean I don't know if you mean the ordinance number. I don't know if they have ordinance numbers actually. Dan, do you know?
They do not. They have a developer's agreement, which is adopted by council. It's done through a DA.
Right. So can you maybe name and date developers agreement for Village at Lake Lily, a more formal naming convention?
Yeah, we can look into, well, actually, while we move on, let me look and pull one up real quick and see how it's labeled, and we can reference it like that.
A more specific naming convention for. Okay.
All right, is everybody good with that comment? Show of hands if good.
So, so just to answer that I just pulled up the development agreement for Maitland City Center, and it's called Development Agreement (parentheses Maitland City Center). Is what it's called.
Oh, I had muted myself. Well, then maybe in the language of deed actually state these are applications that have an approved development agreement.
Yeah, what we could do is we could put development agreement for Maitland City Center adopted, and then give the date that it was adopted. And we might, let's see. We can also, if they've been recorded with the county clerk of courts, we can actually put when it was recorded too.
Right. The document number or something.
Yeah, I'm not seeing it on this one, but they are recorded, so we should be able to dig that up.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other comments on 1-7? All right, we go screaming into Article 3. How about page 3-1? Page 3-2. All right. Looks like 3-3 is completely blank. Is that intended that way, Dan, or did we miss something? It jumps from 3
No, we just had extra paper that we wanted to use. I honestly, I don't know why it did that. That's a good comment. We'll have to ask.
322.
Yeah, I mean, it goes in order. It goes right to it. So I think it's maybe just
formatting, because I think this has to start on a new page for formatting purposes.
Yeah, but and I get that, but it jumps from 3-2 to 3-4 number wise. Missing 3-3.
I'm not seeing it. I'm trying to.
Your page number down at the bottom. You have page 3-2, and then there's a blank page, and then it goes 3-4.
That's great. Let me. I brought that up to our clearing because that was happening a lot in the downtown things. When we have the footnotes and stuff, we shouldn't pay attention to the pageation, the page numbering, because the footnotes mess it all up. He assures us that once this is finished and the footnotes go away, that it's fixed, because that's just like an automatic thing. So throughout these documents, you will see that the page numbers are a little screwed up.
Okay.
So
comment, make sure page numbers are fixed.
Good catch.
All right, how about page 3-4?
Can we go back? Actually, that is 3.4. Yeah. What is the superscript A for? It's consistent on all of these. Is it just making reference to some previous table or something? I couldn't find it. In the header of that.
Good question.
It's a footnote on 3-5, on page 3-5. The
Oh.
A at the end of district is on 3.5.
Exactly. Yep, that's right.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. So that's one of those ones that'll be removed in the final document, correct?
Correct.
Correct.
Do you know from a formatting standpoint, has there been any discussion around the layout of page, like in this case, and it's consistent with at least all of these, page 3-4 and 3-5, more specifically, the graphic and the dimensions or the reference on the graphic to the reference of the standard items in the table above it. Hopefully that's going to be visible kind of consistently, or you know what I'm saying? Like if you got the page open, you're seeing one on one side of the page and one on the other, not a back-to-back situation.
And I think it goes to Keith's comment about why there's not a page 3.3. Is I think that's exactly right. I've got my, I don't know if you guys have printed it out, but when you do print it out, that's exactly right. It appears on the left and right hand side of a page.
Right.
So I think that's intentional, and I think that we absolutely want to keep that formatting.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah, they just may, if they're going to do that, a lot of times when we do those documents, we may have a small note that says this page intentionally left blank.
Yep.
If not, you're somebody like me that's looking through it, and I printed it out and I'm wondering what happened to my 3-3. I'll lose sleep over that one.
We're going to put a picture of all P&Z commissioners on that blank page.
Yeah.
I have a question in that same section where, again, it goes back to just a definition of, accommodates certain group living arrangements as conditional uses, accessory uses, as home occupation. I saw that, but in other compatible uses. Have we not gotten to that?
That's correct. That's going to be in Article
Okay, so
4, which is the very next one that we're going to do next time. That's
Okay.
the use standards.
Okay.
We don't have to wait long for that one.
Okay, I'm gonna revive something that was long dead. When we did either the comp plan or the downtown, we talked about lot coverage versus ISR. And I feel like we left it that we would come back to it at this point in time. So either Bear or Dan, can you define for us exactly what we mean by lot coverage?
The lot coverage is the percentage of the lot that's actually covered by a structure. It doesn't have to be impervious, but it's covered by the lot. It usually refers to buildings.
So a vertical structure.
Vertical structure, but it's different from FAR because vertical goes up, whereas the lot coverage is just the footprint of the structure, basically, and how much of the lot that.
Right.
But
what are you considering?
P&Z's recommendation. Go ahead.
What are you considering a structure? Like, obviously you have a house, a detached garage, a shed, but like, would a pergola be a structure with lot coverage?
Yeah, generally not. A pergola, because it is impervious, it's generally not considered a structure. Structures generally have either poles or walls in a roof structure. But I mean, if P&Z wants to eliminate lot coverage because it seems a little redundant, I absolutely would be okay with it.
I think I've been an advocate of that for a while. Otherwise, it needs to be very clearly defined.
If you want to, if we haven't, that's in module 1, so you have that. If you go to page or Article 10.7, it does provide definition of lot coverage. That's where it gets into lot measurement.
What are you referencing there?
Article 10, page 7, so 10-7. And impervious is also at the top of that page too. So both impervious and lot coverage are discussed there. Not saying that we shouldn't talk about getting rid of it, but if you're curious about how it's defined, that's where it is.
So Jamie, as you do development around the Central Florida area, do you see a lot of ordinances using lot coverage?
No. No, it's really only looking at with residential, your main drivers are your ISR and your density. I have seen in the case of master plan developments, when you establish an ISR, let's say something is like multi-phased, are you looking at the ISR in individual lots? So let's say it's 65%. Well, does that specific lot need to be 65%, or maybe does this whole block? That's kind of the only place where I've encountered like any nuance to this standard. But otherwise, lot coverage is not something that's I typically run into.
And this is something that's
it's a pleasure of the board.
Oh, sorry, Dan. I was going to say this is something that's carried forward from the existing code, so there's no reason why I think that's where Dan was going, is if everybody decides they want to consider removing it, that's well within your purview.
Barrett knows my feeling on lot coverage.
Well, I mean, as I've read through it, it's inconsistent too. It's like it's confusing to me that you would have a lot coverage maximum of 35% on something, and then an impervious coverage max of 70.
That didn't make sense on the next page. It does not add up to 100.
Yeah.
But the reason why is because this is the maximum. So this is like the difference between 35 and 70 on that one. It doesn't add up to 100, but that includes your driveways, swimming pools, patios. So if you subtract the difference between the lot coverage and the impervious coverage maximum is what's left over for landscaping and pools and things of that nature, or pervious landscaping, I should say.
Yeah, in the way it's used here, it doesn't necessarily have to add up to 100, but it's if it's confusing to us who are in the profession, then we can definitely look at getting rid of that. I'm not going to fight on that one.
Personally, I think everything that is impervious, be it building, surface, sidewalk, pavers, driveway, asphalt, should be considered impervious and just have one figure.
So that's really just delete lot coverage standards throughout, right?
If we're all in agreement.
That's the proposal. Yeah, all right.
Everybody in agreement? Like we have a quorum.
I don't know if are we raising our hands still?
I don't know. It's kind of early.
I can't see anybody on the screen.
Okay.
I'm still trying to get my head around some of this, and I think that's kind of early to just start deleting that when we haven't even gone through the other standards.
Yeah, all we're doing is we're just agreeing, like, we're going to come back to these. We're just agreeing if they're worth leaving in at this point, and then coming back. We're going to have to come back and look at a lot of this once we get through the document, because there may some of these that we might find we want a different answer because we learned something different downstream. I think right now it's just a way of us logging that this is an item.
Because I understand impervious. I'm trying to figure out the difference between the two, between lot coverage and impervious.
The short answer is lot coverage is just structures, is the percentage of the lot covered by structures, whereas impervious is structures plus driveways, patios, and swimming pools. So essentially, if you got rid of the lot coverage, the implication is that it wouldn't matter what percentage that impervious is building structures, accessory structures versus just impervious surface. What mattered is impervious surface only.
Well, it's actually interesting. That's a big difference then. I mean, that means you could build a 9,000 square foot single story house on this 12,500 square foot lot.
That would be the implication, right? You're not limited in your building envelope necessarily,
I'm not
or
sure
it would increase the possible building envelope.
Well, you factor in your setbacks. You know, you probably won't have a 9,000 square foot single story unit. And so that will balance the impervious coverage of the actual lot itself.
Good point.
You know, your ISRs, you handle your drainage too. So, I mean, again, this is just my opinion, but the lot coverage is covered by the ISR. So having two is sort of redundant. If anything, to me, it's saying it's more restrictive if someone wants to build, you know, oh my gosh, I can't do the math that quickly, Matt. 5,000 square foot house on a 12,000, they wouldn't be able to because of the 30%.
Good point.
Yeah, I think the only time it would really come into play like that with someone building a really, really, really big house is if they used pervious pavement or pervious pavers for all of their driveway, sidewalks, everything else like that, and just maximized their impervious just on the building envelope or on the first floor structure. But I don't disagree. I think it could get very confusing. If it's confusing us who are all in the field and work with it, then the readers that are going to be reading this will probably confuse them even more so, that have expertise at some level in this. So if we look at taking it out, we look at taking it out.
So
I also, let's remind people, I meant to mention this in the introduction. Once we get done with this, then we're going to test all of this with some test examples that'll compare and contrast the existing code with what we've done. So we will always have the opportunity before we adopt this to see it tested on different properties and different scenarios.
So did it come up for discussion with the consultant we're using, if this was unique to them, or do they see this in other codes?
I don't know if it specifically came up, but it was not pointed out that it's, I don't think it was pointed out that it was.
No, it's definitely not exclusive to Maitland. It's not common because it does get confusing. And I think, again, we're trying to write the code to where it's more intuitive with pictures and graphics, and having things like this that could become easily confusing, I think is, you know, I think I'm not completely fine with it coming out.
Collectively, if we can't figure it out, I think that's one of the examples, if you go back, you know, in the history of our city, where it just does confuse people. And when you talked about using pervious materials or impervious, like, wouldn't that be a good thing to pavers and things that we encourage?
Yeah. And we historically, we've got some developments that have a lot coverage maximum per lot and some that's per development. And honestly, it's really more of a nightmare to enforce and keep up with than it is helpful. If the intent is to protect the environment and allow rain to seep through, I think the impervious surface is the better route to govern.
All right. How about anything else on 3-6? Was it 3-6 we're on? Lost track.
3-4.
Sorry, 3-4. How About 3-5. So this is an example where I was tying the two maps that we have together. I was using this to look at that when we were comparing what was grouped under the new RSF-1. The footnotes were sort of a good description versus the old plan.
That's right. And if you look at the development standards of RS1 and RS1A, single family, they're very extremely similar. So this first one, we're not seeing a big difference.
And the existing zoning map has now been posted in the chat as well.
There was two in there that had the same name. Were those?
Those were both the new.
Okay. How about 3-6? So I have a question down at the bottom of the page, the note 2, bracketed note 2, which, as I understand, will stay in the document.
Mm-hmm.
When I first looked at it, it was very, very specific. Is this tied to some other agreement? It just seemed very, very specific that we were adding to this. I'm just sort of curious what the intent.
That's a carryover from the existing code. It's because when we added in Domerick Hills, Druid, and Mayo Avenue from Orange County, they were developed with a different lot coverage requirement. In fact, I don't think they had a lot coverage requirement. And this gets back to our earlier comment. This footnote goes away if we delete the lot coverage requirements. But that's because in order to avoid non-conformities, like Chairman Jaffe was saying, they included this as one way to avoid non-conformities. If when you annex an area in, you basically say it's not non-conforming, kind of in the same way we did all those downtown properties. So, I mean, that was the intent, which when those were annexed in 2005. But obviously, if we got rid of lot coverage, then this one would go away as it would be irrelevant. So that's like this corner.
Part of staff and the consultants' struggle when writing these sections here was that we do have a lot of land that was annexed in that was already developed, and when we annexed them in, we annexed them in with the agreement that they could keep to the standards they were. So we had a lot of zoning districts that were created just for one development because that's how we annexed in. So instead of trying to give it something comparable, we just gave it its very own zoning district in the past. This we're trying to consolidate it and make it a lot easier and eliminate a lot of the little special conditions that may apply to just one neighborhood or one thing like that, by trying to make it flexible in the event that they redevelop, but not to the point where we're now allowing people to build something that's way out of character in a district that came in annexed as a certain way.
Yeah, you'll see that in the RSF3, that literally applies to only one subdivision in the whole city, which is Winfield over here. And you can see even on the zoning map, you can see on the far west side how small those lots are and they're developed with very small setbacks and high lot coverage.
So another comment I have under the bracketed note 1, I saw this note in most all cases, and I'll ask you, is there anywhere that this would not apply?
it only applies along the road frontage. This applies for only lakefront property or waterfront property. And this was part of the existing code to avoid kind of creating really oddly shaped lots that would give everybody, like, let's say,
and I get the reasoning. I think the question is that is there a place that this doesn't apply? I mean, it seemed like we added this note in. So I guess my question, would that not be a general definition that rides with lot width as it applies to this code?
Yes, other than it's just so, I guess, so maybe it's just so critical that it is included in the dimensional standards, so it doesn't get missed by having to flip back to like the definitions of the, but
okay. Well,
it's an interesting point.
I do see some spots where it's not included, like in residential multifamily district.
Right, I think it's only in the single family districts, but
okay.
Real quick then, along those lines, Bear, and I don't know if it applies here, but when you talk about waterfront, you take a development like Shell Point off of Horatio, when those houses are pretty small, are large for their lots, and they're on the water and they're too close to the canal, technically speaking, by way of our, code. And is that another example? For me, it always helps sometimes to use something to put it into perspective. So take an entire development like that, not included, waterfronts mentioned. We're not making them non-conforming, are we?
No, well, we wouldn't, unless if they're not already non-conforming, we wouldn't be making them non-conforming, because actually this is more restrictive in the current code. Whether they're currently non-conforming, I don't know. I'd have to research that out, and I'm not familiar with the specifics under how that property was developed, but we're not making this more restrictive when it comes to waterfront property, if that helps. In the current code, it's like it's I think more complex. You actually, in the normal zone, you have, let's say, lot width of 75 feet, but it'll say if it's a waterfront property, it's 110 feet applied at the waterfront's edge.
Well, and it's now come out of the CRA. I always felt for them that they had this cloud hanging over their head because by the way of the 50-foot setback from the water, all those houses were at risk of if you burn down.
Gotcha. So yeah, that's if it's certainly not making anything more restrictive. So it would not be creating new non-conformities. But I don't know if those are non-conforming currently.
So we stopped talking about the note number 1.
Yeah.
Okay, so it looks like in the new code it has that note in RSF 1 and RSF 2.
Mm-hmm.
And then RSF D, it looks like.
Yeah, the single family.
So RSF 1 and 2 are definitely fronting lakes. RSF 3, I don't see any properties offhand that front a lake on RSF 3. RSF D, not necessarily either, but so I think they tried to map it based on the existing zoning districts of where they were in the existing code that matched up with this new code.
So do we need to investigate that to see if it's already not in compliance so that we're not creating a whole nother headache?
No, I don't think so. And the reason is because this RS2 zone and all of them, all that lot width provision is more restrictive in the current code. Or the 2 zone districts that are combined to make the RSF2, those lot width things are actually more restrictive. So in the change from the current code to the new code, we won't be creating any new nonconformities, if that makes sense, because it's less restrictive than it is currently.
Well, but is that a good thing, or if it's less restrictive than what we already have? If I'm
It
understanding.
looks like the only place that we really don't have it is in the RSF3, and that's the Winfield subdivision, which isn't on water anyway. The other single family zoning districts that are on water have that provision in there.
Okay.
If you want me to look up what the width is for those zones currently, so we can compare.
Well, I just think, just from what Glenn brought up, I was just trying to figure out what he was, I was just processing what he was saying, and I'm trying to figure out if that, are we creating something, an unintended consequence, or, with what he was talking about. I'm not sure. And then go ahead.
Keep going. I was just going to say, yeah, don't try and figure out what I'm trying to say ever.
No, but this here, if I may, I can show. So this is the RSF2, and this is combining the current RS2 and RS3 zone. And I'll just drop this over here. This is, this is the lot width requirement for minimum lot width for the RSF2 and RSF3. So this footnote, so right now in the RSF2 and 3, it's 75 feet and 85 feet is lot width. For waterfront, it's 105 and 95. So if anything, it won't be, we haven't analyzed every single lot in the city, but it's unlikely that this creates a situation where somebody could partition a lot and get 2 lakefront lots where they currently have 1. But it's also certainly not creating non-conformities, because if somebody currently is in the RS3, it's requiring 95 feet of frontage on a lake. And if we go to what we're proposing, they would only have to have 75. So and that's where it's created less restrictive. But we also did that to minimize the amount of non-conformities.
So I had noticed this footnote as well. I think Dan already said it's on SF1 and SF2, the minimum lot width specifically.
Mm-hmm.
And this definition does not match what's in the definitions in Article 10. This says minimum lot width is measured along the road frontage, while the new Article 10 says lot width is measured as the distance between straight lines connecting front and rear lot lines at each side of the lot. That may be why it's a footnote.
Mm-hmm. And it's specifically a property fronting a lake or creek.
Well, it says as well as along property. So it's saying the lot width has to be a minimum of 75 at the frontage and along the property boundary of a lake or a creek.
That's what it's trying to say.
I mean, does it? I feel like there are lots that kind of taper based on where they're located.
Yeah, I think from the original intent behind that section of the existing code was to minimize people going in there and splitting a lot and creating a lot of little flag lots, so there could be a whole lot of extra boats and docks and everything on the water. So they made the requirement way back then that it has to have the same lot width at the front as it does along a creek or lake. The definition in 10, I believe, is a general definition for how you measure it. It doesn't contemplate whether you're on a lake or not. We can add some, we can add a language in there that if the parcel is on a lake or a creek, then the measurement is measured at both distances.
Well, and then that actually is a very good, that I do have that question, because, a lot of times when you have a lot that has, riparian, it goes into the middle of the lake as far as, and that is considered part of the lot measurement, the total square footage. Are you measuring a lot from what is, the physical dirt? Or are you going to take into consideration the dirt and all the way into the lake? Because that's technically, their property. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's generally measured from the normal high water elevation.
But even
but it
can, like, depending on the geometry, it can start to taper. So the mean high water line might be narrower than the street frontage.
Correct.
Like
And
on Minnehaha,
back when a lot of these.
I guess I'd ask, well, Jamie's right, but what's the objective to have them the same on the lake and the
right?
street?
The objective was to minimize how many flag lots or extra boat docks were put on lakes back when it was created.
And I think the way it's been used, not that this is a bad thing, but in order for somebody to split a lot, you had to have at least 115 feet of width. That's it. And so therefore, anyone who just simply had 100-foot lot, they couldn't split it into two. And I get that. But back to using the measurements, because there are some occasions where a lake lot has, as Jamie said, that tapering at the lake, and you might deem them worthless. Again, I'm not sure what we're trying to accomplish with this, but I know somebody went through this on Lake Nina. They had to buy 20 feet from their property next door in order to put in their boathouse.
So do you have a recommendation that you'd like to see it changed to?
If you're asking me, I'm not, I was addressing like the way we were talking about whether or not it was calling out lake lot specifically and the value of that. I think Jamie said something about the width of the street, but yet on the lake lot, we're also saying the width of the lot at the lake. And does that make sense? Am I saying, did I say that right, Jamie? What
I
you
think so. Yeah, I'd be interested to hear how others feel, because personally, I'd be more concerned about the frontage rather than the where it meets the high water line. Many opportunities that's giving people access to a lake or waterfront property that by these standards might not qualify them to do so. I don't know if Keith or Matt have any ideas. Putting you guys on the spot.
It's a good comment. It's a very good comment. And if the commission wants to recommend, ultimately, when we get to the recommendation stage, that we look at a different standard, for instance, the lot width at the road is X and it can be reduced at least 50% of that, or whatever number you guys feel comfortable with at the lakefront, or just get rid of the lakefront lot measurement. The possibility of having things chopped up and a lot of little boat ramps and flag lots could be a consequence. But when staff was going through this, we had a lot of discussion on it as well, whether we even wanted to keep this or whether we even really care about that, because we're talking limited number of parcels that would be able to do anything anyway at this point.
Well, I think you have to put a level of, of some kind of controls on these, and matching it up with the lot width, seems reasonable. Again, trying to make sure we're just not oversaturating these lakefronts with, multiple boats and multiple slips and things. So I think you have to have some level of protection of that. And I think that's what this is trying to accomplish, as I understood it. And we've talked about this a while back on some of these iterations, and that's the way I understood was the goal. And that seems reasonable to me.
That was definitely the historical goal of why it was stated that way. If we don't feel that it's, if we don't feel that it's still longer a goal, then we can absolutely change that in any way we want. There's definitely pros and cons. The more lakefront lots you add, the higher the value goes up on the property.
Right.
But there's a cost with that about people that really like their lake having 10 times the amount of boat docks and boaters on there. It's but again, we're staff is really okay. Well, I should say some staff is really okay with either way we go on this. And if the direction of the city, the representatives representing the city say we really don't think it should be that way anymore, or we don't think it should be the equal amount or whatever, we're absolutely open to any recommendations.
And I understand when the objective is not to get a bunch of 100-foot lots that want to split. I have no idea. And again, back to my little simpleton way of thinking sometimes is, are there examples where this is, a possibility or an issue? And I live on the lake, by the way, and so I appreciate the protection of the lakes as much as anybody. So I don't know what the objective beyond, I get the lot split. I don't know how many times somebody could go create a flag lot and say, oh, but I think Dan just said, if anyone had lake access, that's what Domrick's about, Minnehaha Shores is about. It does add value to every one of those homes.
Yeah, and we have a case in right now that a citizen has asked me several times over the course of the last couple of years. Their neighbor does not have enough land. They're not actually touching the lot. And if they were to touch it, they couldn't meet it because of the standard currently in place. So she's asked me multiple times, can I sell her 20 feet of my land or 30 feet of my land just so she has lakefront access? And the answer under our current code is no, because she has to have that full width. I see value in both. I see value in, let it happen. It increases the property value. It increases, more people to enjoy the public lakes in the city. But historically, the city was very protective about how many access points they wanted people on the lakes.
And I just want to make sure everybody is aware of the difference between what's current and what's being proposed. So currently in this zone, it's combining these two districts, where it requires either 105 feet of lakefront access or 95 feet. And that is, measuring the lake as well as the frontage on the street to the current proposal, which is a lot width of 75 feet. So it is, the current proposal proposes like a relaxation of, in some case, somewhere between 25 and maybe 15%, just as a heads up. So that's where we are. That's where we are with the current proposal. If we want to make that different, but it's kind of towards the goal of simplifying it. Because right now the lot width is different for lakefronts than it is for non-waterfront property. And this at least simplifies it and gives it all the same lot width without requiring extra lot width for waterfront properties.
And I don't even know if all these discussions are tied to the exact same issue of that width. But on Lake Nina, and Keith, you may have seen this because they just built a dock, and it's a little house off to the corner that it picked up 20 feet from the neighbor. I think the guy's dad passed away, so he was able to carve out an extra 20 feet. And as a result, now built a dock. So they have a nice boardwalk that meanders down. And I know that house instantly went up in value with the addition of that dock. And they don't have 75 feet, or I don't know if that's what they created or not. But those are good things to me in the big scheme of it. I don't know if that discussion is what we're talking about this page.
I think it is. I think that's exactly what that footnote 1 refers to. Because otherwise, again, there would be no, if you took that out, there would be no restriction on the frontage on a waterfront you could have. And you could have a bunch of pie-shaped lots that had a lot of access to the lakes.
You can't have a bunch, because I don't know if there's a bunch of opportunities for that, but there might be some out there. You're correct. And I have no idea.
Sure. But no, in terms of, I think that's exactly the issue though, that's addressed by footnote 1 throughout all the single family neighborhoods to kind of control that amount of partitioning.
I'm not a fan of complicating things, but maybe a potential compromise could be the spirit of this language, but your mean high water line could be within like 10 or 20% of your traditional frontage to kind of cover the cases where there might be a different, sorry. Oh, sorry, it startled me.
Sounds like your high water line's changing over there.
Yeah, it's changing as we speak. I don't know. Again, I'm not a fan of complicating things. I'd prefer it to be more straightforward than that, but it seems like, there's some that want to preserve that that width all the way through. So that could be an option.
I echo your sentiment. I know I don't want to go. I'm not trying to create this situation where a whole bunch of 105-foot lots get split and now you have a totally different scenario. But I do think that there are occasions where this doesn't apply to the benefit of the property owner.
Is this one, since we're going to do a loop back, maybe this one's one we flag as a comeback? Because I think it's probably a good exercise to sort of maybe go and look at some different conditions. One that's banging in my head is take, for example, there's a large lot, open, undeveloped lot. I think they're getting ready to do development on it. That's at the mouth of the Lake Nina to Maitland Canal that you go over there. And really that piece of property has a very narrow street front, but in this scenario, could they, I doubt they do it, but could they go and create a whole bunch of little pie-shaped properties out there and just saturate that area with docks? They're restricted by sort of the canals and things, but there still are pieces of properties out there that can get impacted. So maybe it's just look at those scenarios and think of pros and cons.
I thought that lot that you're referring to was only being split into two. I thought that's what the guy was doing. He touches both lakes, Lake Nina, Lake Maitland, has a canal down the side. And I think he was only going to 2 homes.
I think you're right. It's just in this condition, if we had left this open, could he have taken that and done something different? So that's sort of just using that area. And that's where I love having real life scenarios to understand when this applies and either makes it better or makes it worse.
That's actually a perfect example, because that's the reason he only went to 2 lots, is that he had to meet the frontage along the waterfront. Zoning wise, they probably could have gone to more lots, but because they touched water on all the sides, they couldn't create lakefront lots without having that same frontage.
Yep. And yeah.
So can we do that? Can we flag this one? This one would be for us is we're going to have to loop back and look at this one when we go get to the end of this. Because I think we could grind on this one for a while.
Can enough people view my screen to know if I capture that adequately, or should I read it out loud?
Trying to get my little bar to move over.
Yeah, maybe when we come back, Barrett, we can actually take some parcels and show them a couple different examples of if we keep it as it is versus if we reduce it, X percent, or if we eliminate it altogether, what potential scenarios could happen.
We can do that 2 weeks
and do
from
it
now.
that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, 2 weeks or 3 months, whenever we get to come back to it all.
Okay.
But I think some of it where it will get a little bit tricky is if you do have flag lots, you have to have some kind of minimum, because you don't want to have just a bunch of little points onto a lake.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to put a boat dock, you have to have a certain amount of setback anyway. And if you have odd shaped lots that go into the lot, your dock could then ultimately be encroaching into someone else's property, depending on how the lot is shaped and flagged and things like that. So we can run some scenarios and bring it back to you and kind of show you what would happen if we did it, left it as is, we reduced it 50%, or eliminated it altogether, or any other scenario that you guys want us to run.
Or kept it the same as it is now.
Yeah.
As there are other rules to protect that as well. Like you said, there are setbacks from your property line. So if you can't meet those, I'm sometimes a firm believer, if a person wants to put a dock right in front of or a wall for that matter, right in front of them to block their view, that's their view of the lake. So as long as you meet the setbacks.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a couple cases that we're dealing with now where the lot becomes kind of a pie-shaped lot into the water. And so they meet the setback to put the dock on there, but as the dock extends, it actually encroaches into someone else's property under the water, or above the water, I guess. And so it's just a matter of however they platted the lot back then and how the dock was permitted at the time. But we'll run some scenarios and bring it back and see how, it may ultimately lead to a preference. Well, it should lead to a preference one way or the other.
Okay. How about page 3-7? Or did I jump pages again? We were on 3-4, right?
Yeah, I think you're right.
3-5. I'm sorry, we were on 3-6.
Mm-hmm.
3-7.
I had a question and I don't know where it fit in, because I was just trying to understand with the between 3-4, 3-5, 3-6, and the different residential. Am I understanding that the smaller lots allow detached dwellings? Once you start stepping down, where's the bar
For detached, oh, you mean attached dwellings? Duplexes?
Yeah, like you have a single family home and you want to put up a detached garage, or you want to do an ADU or something like that. Where is there that says you can't do that?
Those are in accessory uses and structures, and that's going to be in Article 4, where we get into accessory dwelling units and accessory structures. But no, detached garages are allowed in all single family zones.
No matter what the lot size is.
Well, that's when you get into lot coverage and things like that. But yeah, there's nothing, they're not prohibited.
Okay.
But yeah, we'll get into all the accessory structures and accessory uses in Article 4, which is the next one after this one.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
How about 3-8? (3-9). Uh, 3-10. So I did on 3-10, I had a question about bracket note 2, applicable to the development lot as a whole rather than individual lots under townhouse units.
Yeah, because for
So-
lot width, because a lot of times, obviously, when that's just for townhomes, you don't have to have, a lot of times the lots are split right at the wall, right? So you wouldn't have to have 75-foot units.
Okay.
I think that's all that's saying.
Maybe that could be better depicted. So the lot itself, let's say the townhome minimum width is 20 feet. Then that should say 20 feet and then have like a footnote at the corner on a end unit. The minimum lot width is 30 feet.
Well, the side yard setback only applies, that's in footnote 3. I don't know if you
So
saw
25.
that.
Yeah.
In the graphic on 311 kind of shows an example of a duplex or what it could be a townhouse there, where the lot measurement is the units, the lot as a whole. This is consistent with how, if you recall, we adopted that OCD ordinance, the conjoined dwellings that would allow the duplex fee simple lot split. We measure the lot size on the lot as a whole, not each individual split duplex piece. If that adds any context.
The lot as a whole. So then the building, so if it's a duplex and you're saying the whole lot would be 75, so each unit would be 32.5?
Yeah, if it's, yeah. So in a case where you have maybe
30,
you have a case where you have like
the side yard setback too. Right, you couldn't go build.
But in case when you have,
No, that's not.
I apologize if I misunderstood your example.
But didn't we?
In a case where you have like townhouses that are a series of like 4 or 5 units within one building, the
Right.
lot width is measured at the building of the lot, not each individual townhouse unit.
Right. So where is that standard? Each individual townhome lot.
I do, let's see. I'm not sure.
Not here.
I have to look to see if we have one.
That's something that would be in, if it was, it'd be in the use specific standards in Article 4. But I don't know if we have that. Let's see. If you look at 419, we do have classifications of townhouse dwellings. But I don't know if that gets you into the width. Are you looking specifically for the minimum width of a unit?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right, because that ordinance that Dan just mentioned means that we can sell those fee simple. So they would be a lot that would be conveyed.
A townhouse, yeah. Let me see.
No, Jamie, you were referring to a duplex, right? What he said?
The ordinance that I think it was up to 4 units, right?
But the ordinance about the OCD was when you have a duplex and you split it and sell it fee simple. And so you have 2 basically single family lots that used to be a duplex, and we allowed you to use the whole lot of the duplex to count as your lot minimums. That this just kind of carries that over for townhouses as well. But I think you're right. I don't think we have a standard of a minimum lot width per townhouse unit in here.
No, they're by definition.
We just have it based on the whole lot.
Oh, sorry. In 419, in the next article in 419, the definition where they have to be at least 3 or more, but and they're side by side. But we can put a comment to. We do not have a use specific standard that they have to be a minimum width, so we can put that in there. Or
well, I would propose a minimum width of 20 feet.
What?
I would propose a minimum of 20 feet.
I think that would go in Article 4, but we can make the note here to make sure that we put that in Article 4. Minimum. a straw poll. Does everybody concur?
Everybody good with that? Show of hand. All right. We have quorum.
Okay.
And can you say that again about the duplex? You're saying that even though you're splitting it in half and it's two separate fee simple, wouldn't you split the lot in half too?
You would, but the way the ordinance was written and adopted by council is that generally how it first started is you had existing duplexes on a single lot. And so what we said is we were allowing you to go in and fee simple split it in half. So you're creating two ownership lots. Mm-hmm. But for the purpose of the minimum lot size, rather than rezoning and creating its own zoning district, we said for the purpose of the lot size, you're using the size of the two units combined.
Okay, now, okay, I understand that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. How about?
I think that was our first ordinance that we started introducing graphics into the code.
Page 311. How about page 3-12? So I have a comment on this one. It has to do with the bracket note 1. So in this specific one, it addresses that if you basically have two districts, so these are two districts that properties abut each other from different districts, and they provided, I guess, the more restrictive setback for one. It's very specific to this district. Would that not generally be the case for other districts too, that if you have two districts that butt up against each other, would you not share a same principle here, that you're using the more restrictive setback?
You say when we have two districts butting up against each other?
Yes.
So so generally, and I'm going to say this 100 times tonight, in a future section that we're going to get to, you have different buffer standards based on the types of uses. Different uses that are incompatible have different size buffers. Setback wise, that note 1 was put in there based on when the Winfield was annexed into the city, they came in with those restrictions. So this note 1 just carried forward what the agreed upon annexation status was.
So it's not about districts abutting property lines. It again is more specific to that pre-agreement or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, it's specifically, you look at the map up here,
Correct.
you can zoom in. This is the multifamily abutting the RS3. So it involves, and as you see in the footnote, is they ask us, maybe can we just get rid of this and address this through residential compatibility standards? And that was a note to staff that I think we actually missed. So I kind of tend to think the answer is yes. But that footnote is strictly, this is the only RSF3. This is the Winfield annexation area. So that's what they're talking about.
Okay. Anything else on 3-12? So the next page I have is, and this may be one of those jumbled numbers, is showing as 12-13. Is that right?
Yeah, again, this is where
Yeah,
the
that's
formatting's messed up. Yeah, based just because of the footnotes.
Okay. Any questions on 12-13? How about now 3-14? So I have a comment on this one. It's in the verbiage at the top. It talks about the maximum height. So the RG3 district has a maximum height of 55, and the RG2 district had a maximum height of 35. That seems pretty extreme to all of a sudden bring those two districts together. But I know it makes a statement out here referencing that, I guess it's trying to say the residential compatibility standard would sort of soften this transition. Is that what it's trying to communicate?
Yes.
Yeah, and in the case of the RMF district, we've got the one that's down in the Gem Lake area, which is going to be moot if they ever go to PD. The Winfield one, of course. So the Gem Lake one, that was resolved with the future land use that did allow them to go up to 5 stories. And you'll see that because I believe he'll be probably coming back to you in the next few months. I think he's getting tired of staff's reviewing. So he may be coming to you guys in the next few months. The other ones, we had a lower height limits, but we open it up a little bit. Should they get redeveloped in the future, we didn't want to, box them in too much.
That's right. If you can see the screen, we talked quite a bit about this as staff about that issue, right? Because we recognize that was a big shift. And this in the future land use, the density is, Dan, do you remember 10 units per acre? So even though that height is 55.
Which one are you talking about? All right.
If you map the west side of Park Lake,
all of that was 19
units per acre. So the likely
it was 19.8 until the comp plan.
Yeah, that's right. It was 19.8. The comp plan reduced it. So yes, that's that. It's an interesting point you bring up, but this is where it would apply, and it would raise. Right now, it's capped at 35 feet. It would raise it to 55, but were it to redevelop, it's so constrained by the density. It would have to be on big lots if you're going to have a big tall building, simply because of the relatively low density.
Would it be restrained by, our city line is there? Would it still, that compatibility reach over the city line, or how does that work when you cross?
That's a great question. I don't think it does. And I think that's a real important thing to consider.
No. The way it's drafted, at least in the downtown area, the way it's drafted is it only is compatible. Neighborhood compatibility was against traditional neighborhood future land use, so it doesn't contemplate other jurisdictions' land.
But I think what you're saying is it's so restricted by. I just want to make sure that we're meeting the intent of our expectations here, and not opening this thing up to do something larger. I mean, as far as, if we're not worried about being a good neighbor to our bordering city, is, I guess that's a question.
Is the only occasion you're referring to of that is the Jim Lake?
That's the only RS.
And if that's true, it's master plan, like they have height on the Winter Park side.
Yeah, I don't need to get hung up on it. It just caught me odd that extreme height difference all of a sudden got grouped together.
No, it did it for us too, because, and I'm trying to see if there's any other RG2 property in the city, and I think that's it. Is this a Gem Lake? Not Gem Lake, but these condos and townhomes here.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any on the zoning map.
So that is a thing, that this would go from 35 feet to 55 feet. That's true, and we talked about it, and if we want to make that a comment to look at that, but the problem is when you combine this with all the other dark brown multifamily zone properties, those are already 55, so you're kind of left with leaving this its own zoning district. So that was the trade-off we were trying to consider. Certainly, if you lower it, a lot of these then they would cry foul because they're already developed to 55 feet.
Yeah, I'm not hung up on the idea of I'm just lowering. I'm just trying to make sure that if anybody else is concerned, we're doing a misservice to that area.
That's a good question.
I mean, short of redevelopment, I think there's only one parcel that's left to be developed in that RMF district. And a lot of it's encompassed by wetland.
So I'm good with
right here.
You flag it as a comment like you did for something,
Yeah.
and maybe for us just to take an eye on it as we loop back through this.
You want me to make the comment about also the neighborhood compatibility applying to neighboring jurisdictions?
Yeah, I think it's just more reminding us it's that all of a sudden we've taken an area that 35 foot high, and now we're allowing them to have 50 foot. So I mean, I would ask the question, why did we have it as 35 feet high before? We had a reason. So I don't want to.
There was a standard height that we had on a lot of our jurisdictions, on a lot of our zoning districts.
So yeah, I just flag it as something to, as we come back through this, maybe we pause on it again.
Definitely. It's definitely a kind of an artifact of, or consequence of combining our medium density and our high density zoning districts, multifamily districts.
All right. How about
and when we look?
Oh, so good, Dan.
I was just going to add, when we looked at doing this, as well as with the comp plan, because we raised a lot of the heights in the comp plan too when that was adopted. The intent behind that is that we know we're not growing out anymore, so the only way we can grow is up. And so raising the heights was really, it seemed like something that was, something we could do and almost should do.
Okay. How about page 3-15? (3-16). I had one that sort of ties in 316 and 317. It's the rear yard setback. Bullet 4 has a bracketed 5 in it. So on 3-17, it has the bracketed 5 in it. And again, it's going back to, as I was looking at some of these, I'm trying to understand if there's specific conditions that were agreed upon that we're trying to protect. This one just said, the note said this one was just specific to PO district standards. So does that mean we were just carrying it over because it was there before, or was there something that we need to carry it over because it's some grandfathered in?
Yeah, I think the short answer is yes. But I'm not super familiar with the history of this. Maybe Dan is, I don't know.
I'm trying to follow along here. We're talking footnote 5 or note 5.
Footnote 5, yeah, it's referenced off of the rear yard setback on document on mixed multifamily district, but then it's the definition of note 5 is on 3-17.
Properties on Maitland View, etc. So what note 5 is saying is that if there is a residential piece that's adjacent to non-residential, they can combine it and reduce that setback to 0. But as long as the lot is residential or going to be developed as residential, they have to meet that setback of what's stated in the table. I think that the property that mostly affects is the one I think that's real close to your house, where it's a residentially zoned property that has a non-residential use on it. And at one point there was a developer looking at buying the 2 commercial pieces and the residential piece next to it and doing kind of a townhouse development. And so what that was saying is that if they combine it all into one, then the setbacks within themselves go to 0, but they still have to have that setback and buffer from the adjacent property that's single family. I don't know if I helped or confused it more.
It's more just a principle statement of just trying to understand, again, you're going back and we've got a document here we're cleaning up, but I'm just trying to understand, is the intent of this, is this something that, should be a standard throughout the other, or is this just some agreed upon footnote in history and we're just carrying it forward for that reason only? That's what
it is being carried over. It is being carried over, but if that's the that's the pleasure of the commission to go a different direction, we're absolutely open to any suggestions.
Yeah, again, I wasn't hung up on the specifics. It's just more as I read this, when I see these very specific detailed pieces, it's just ask the question, should they come forward, or if this one's important enough should it be part of some of these other items?
In the spirit of full disclosure, and I didn't introduce everything at the beginning. So this is one of those examples. I have a property that I own on Horatio that does happen to be right next to Keith. And I think this is an example where it's a good one to be able to say, how does this work and affect the residential, and again, whenever the time comes that I'm not supposed to be included in a discussion, I'll happily step aside.
Yeah, again, like I said, I'm not, it's not the item that it's just as I see these specific things, and the footnote just says that we brought it over because it was part of the PO district standards.
Yeah, it was carried forward, but it's all it's really saying is that if you do want to, if they do get that other property and utilize it as a unified development, that the internal setback then goes to 0, but obviously the adjacent property that's not part of that unified site plan would still have to comply.
Yeah.
Keith, I might be understanding your suggestion is why is it just narrowly applied to the Horatio Avenue corridor?
I'm saying,
just saying throughout the zone, could you not do that? Is that kind of what you're thinking?
Yeah, that's all when I look at these, I'm, you know, if the principle of this is a good idea, then, you know, why does it not become, you know, part of overall? Anyway, again, it just maybe we're trying to carry over some things we put in before, but, you know, is that what we should be doing, or should we look at the things that we've got in there and go, okay, are these good things? Do they apply, and should it be a footnote, or should it actually be a real, you know, setback or criteria for some of these other districts?
I agree. I think that we could certainly kind of look at and model, see what the implications would be of applying that to the entire zone, similar to how we're looking at the lot width in the single family residential or lakefront property, and circle back around and see what the implications are.
So I guess I'm not saying put it in there, but I'm saying I think we should look at these and ask ourselves that question: should we do that or not?
Mm-hmm.
Because I can't tell if it's just because of ease, or we took the easy way out and we just brought it over as a footnote.
Agreed.
And I can tell you from history.
It applies.
Go ahead, Dan. Sorry.
It applies to more than just that one area, because it applies basically where you along Maitland Avenue also for multifamily and commercial. If they were to get some of the residentially zoned ones and come in as a unified plan, it's not any different than if they came in and bought several parcels and did a PD. All of the internal setbacks, regardless of what the original zoning was, would go away. This just doesn't make them rezone it to a PD. It allows them to reduce or eliminate that internal setback, even if the base part of that zoning is different.
And I can share with you some of the history of that particular language. It was around, and there's only a couple that do apply, and there's one on Maitland Avenue, and it was when they were redoing the EAR document. I think that's what it's called, the EAR document. It was trying to get the city to address, here's an orphan residential property on Horatio that it's not part of a neighborhood, it's not, and it can't be incorporated. What do you do with it?
Did Glenn freeze on us, or did I freeze?
Going forward, or how do you address it?
Yeah, sorry, Glenn, I think
history of why I got
there. Storm is wreaking havoc on some of your connectivity. I lost hearing you when you started talking about the EAR document and it applied to a few properties, and then you froze.
Like the only time I
think he was saying. Yeah, it didn't freeze on my end. I heard what you said. You said anything that staff wants, give them to them. That's what I heard.
Can you hear me okay now?
Yeah, in reality, no, you have good points, and I think it would be a good idea to look at this as it could apply to other properties. I think we're too narrow on limiting it to these two areas, and we can look at expanding this.
That's all I'm saying is that if we're these very specific ones, let's just ask ourselves, you know, is this a good idea that applies elsewhere?
Yeah, and I'm open to that discussion as well. And at the time, like I said, there was one on Horatio, and then there's one law office on Maitland Avenue. And that's why at the time, the language, almost without calling those two properties out, we're really describing those two properties.
Right. Where's the reference to Maitland Avenue? Because I just see it footnote 5.
There was another, in that EAR document. So I don't know where you exactly carried this over from, but it's that, I think it's Garfunkel, the law office right at George and Maitland Avenue. That was the other one at the time that got referenced in the document.
Okay.
Barrett, I think we should definitely look at applying this throughout.
Okay, so that's what I've got here. Is if everybody agrees, we can note that.
All right, 3-18.
Oh, sorry, I had something on 16.
Okay, go ahead.
So I was wondering why a non-residential category doesn't have an assigned FAR. And then it's a two-parter. If we are comfortable with a 0.5 FAR on Maitland Avenue, or if we want to increase that.
Does Maitland Avenue have like its own pond or something? Like, would you just increase it because they don't need all the to retain everything on their own lot?
No, there is no master stormwater well, no, I take that back. Before I speak, I need to check to see where the line actually stops. I know north of Packwood, it all goes to the master one, but I'm not sure how far west that goes. As far as why it's 0.5 and could that be raised or lowered? Absolutely. That was, that's definitely fine. We can put a maximum floor area ratio for residential. That's fine as well.
I mean, I think so yeah, the FAR, and then for the Maitland Avenue corridor specifically, the front yard setback being NA, that doesn't have a footnote. So what exactly do we mean?
That's because it has a build to zone instead. So we wanted to, instead of having a mandatory setback, we wanted to bring the, for more pedestrian oriented development, we wanted to have it had a build to minimum maximum. As opposed to more of the side streets where we did want the setbacks to apply because it's more residential character. That because if it's more commercial character, we wanted to address the street. It's more similar to downtown, how downtown Maitland has the build to zones.
So
this doesn't apply obviously to the rest of it, but it does apply to multifamily commercial Maitland Ave.
The minimum building line is 25 feet.
But that's because it also includes
Yeah, that's for multifamily and commercial only along Maitland Avenue.
Jamie, your point is, I think I see it, is that why isn't this smaller?
Yeah.
That's a good question because
your sidewalks are going to be part of the public right of way. And the minimum sidewalk width is what, 5-6 feet? So then you'd have another, in theory, 30 feet before you get to the building line. I mean, even for an outdoor like patio, it's kind of large.
Good comment.
I don't know if others feel the same way.
I agree.
Go with a comment.
Do you have a suggested distance, or are you okay with NA altogether for multifamily and commercial?
I mean, is it necessary? Can it be rolled into the front yard setback and provide a min-max? Even the 40 feet seems kind of big. I think that what you'll run into is having to park a site and not being able to, access from the rear, which kind of conflicts with bringing the pedestrians to the front, because then you're going to have curb cuts and people are going to be trying to walk along the street where there's cars coming in and out. I don't know that we have the infrastructure to do what we want to do. Not to go all abstract on.
No, I mean, This would,
Yeah,
I mean, I guess this would bring multifamily a little bit closer to the street because than it would if it just applied that setback. And also it would prevent it from going too much further back. I think that was maybe the thought. And then for commercial, I don't know why it's so large for commercial. That's a good question.
I think it was, so we use build to lines versus setbacks in the non-residential districts. And I think the reason for commercial, it was a little bit higher is because they wanted to give people a chance to get off the street and not, you know, have a distance to go back and stack and park in the back. But is that the right number? I don't know, maybe not.
Yeah, it's tricky to hit that sweet spot, especially depending on like the scale of the building and the adjacent buildings, you know, what's happening on the street frontage there.
Yeah, I think this is another one where we could take a couple parcels and do kind of a little scenario of what would happen, you know, draw it out. I know ultimately after all of the recommendation, they're going to do a whole testing phase on all of this and do real scenarios, but we can do some quick ones as we move through before your recommendation.
Yeah, it's an interesting, it could go a lot of different ways, you know, because you can even consider like the marketability of something as it starts to densify. If a specific frontage is more set back, then, you know, you might not have as great of your street visibility as your neighbor if they're closer to you. It's it could be a whole thing. I could write a book.
If you have some thoughts, specific suggestions for this, once you're out of this meeting and stuff like that, what are the rules here? We don't have Drew here, but she can send us emails to staff and say, I would like you to look at this.
Okay.
X, Y, Z, correct, Dan?
Yeah, she can email us individually, or us, I mean staff. by saying, right. When you do a couple test cases, can you test it at this distance or that distance, and then we can do that. I don't think, because it's not the recommendation hasn't come yet. I think we're
right.
Okay.
This is we're workshopping it. If you know you think about it and want us to do some specific things, by all means shoot us an email or a phone call and let us know.
And I think the original distance on that was for enhanced streetscape along Maitland Avenue for commercial and multifamily. So the distance, I think the original intent when we were discussing it was to provide kind of a bigger streetscape like we do in downtown, where we have the parkway, then we have the the activity area. I think that's why it had a little bit distance pushed back.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I understand it, and that just still seems a little bulky to me. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, we'll test it in different ones.
Okay. And then I'd hate to like not move forward, but yeah, is there any particular reason why there's not an FAR applied to non-residential?
I don't remember, Dan. Was that an
Unlimited?
oversight, or I don't remember discussing that.
No, I don't remember either. Now there definitely have height restrictions and setbacks or build to areas and stuff like that. So they're going to be limited in their development parameters, but I don't recall why we did not assign an FAR. I think at this point we were probably 200 plus hours into this document, and we were probably feeling like Oprah and giving a lot away.
I think that's a fair comment. Why no FAR? Let's think about it and see if there's an answer that somebody else has, because I don't have a good answer right now at 8:06 p.m.
8.
That's a great
6.
8:06. Yeah. No, that's a
8:06.
good comment.
All right. I think we had made our way through 317. Anything on 318? 319, when do we anticipate the West Side District?
That's going to come in module 3.
Okay.
That's a pretty big rewrite, so that's why it's taking a little bit longer.
How about page 3-20?
So can I make an editorial comment? I think Dan's going to make the same one. Is that this should look very familiar to everybody because this is the same downtown Maitland stuff that we discussed at length several months ago. So. If you do have additional comments, by all means,
unless something jumps out now. Yeah, unless something jumps out now, this is what council adopted.
Right.
But it was always adopted through and recommended by P&Z and adopted by council with the notion that we are coming back and it wasn't the last crack at it. We're all going to see it again with the rest of the modules coming in.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it's, I'm looking at the document we looked at before. It doesn't look like it's changed, at least that page doesn't.
Some of the portions that were adopted, there's less here than was adopted because there's other portions of the code that were adopted kind of piecemeal, like the neighborhood compatibility part, which is doesn't belong in Article 3. It belongs elsewhere in the document. So it will be, that's why it's not entirely the same, but the content is the same. Just other parts of the downtown ordinance that was adopted is going to reappear in other parts of the LDC.
Okay. How about 3-21? (3-22). Barrett, I won't say anything about that blank page again. 3-24.
Thank you.
Yes.
And this.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, please.
I was just going to say on 3-24, I had done some kind of comparison back to what we had reviewed in the earlier downtown district, and that there's some changes to that table, and I don't recall that those were based on comments that we had made. So I just was curious as to, is that thought process that there's certain components of that table that was presented back in February that are going to be covered in different areas now of the overall document? Things like,
yeah, there was certain,
probably, but let's make sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, there were definitely certain areas that we had to put in to get it adopted because it would have left holes, knowing that it was going to come out of here because it applied generally, not just to the downtown.
Okay.
But yeah, Matt, what did you have specifically? I could,
well, like on that table that exists on section 3.3, so page 3-24, right?
Yeah.
That seems to be consistent with the section 2125 where lot coverage minimum max, as well as well, I guess lot coverage was the only one that I think I saw there.
I think this is where Jamie was successful getting lot coverage out.
Did we talk about it? I don't have it as notes on my version, so that's why I couldn't remember.
I've got notes here.
That brings up a good question.
Yeah, I've got a bunch of notes. Evidently,
they bring.
I can't.
Sorry, Dan, were you talking and then just got cut off?
No, I muted myself because I kept cutting into what Chairman was trying to say. So I just shut myself up so he could finish.
I'm finished.
The only thing I was saying is that brings up a good
Sorry.
coverage elsewhere, because we talked about it specifically on that 1 or 2 districts. But if we want to get rid of lot coverage for all the zoning districts, then that's something that we'll want to record now as well. But as far as the downtown Maitland, it shouldn't have changed at all, other than some things that had to be pulled out, or didn't have to be, but were pulled out because now they're really citywide instead of just downtown wide. But what council adopted was exactly what you sent to them, with one tiny little change. The prohibition of metal walls that P&Z recommended leave in there and not prohibit them, council allowed them to stay as accent pieces only. Not, you couldn't do a whole metal wall, but you could use.
Right.
So Matt, did I understand you correctly that?
And they included IFAS.
Yeah, but this, you're talking about lot coverage specifically. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, it was included in the table of the version of the document that I have from back in February. And it's not showing up here.
That's really weird. Chairman, were you being joking when you said that Jamie got taken out, or did that really happen? I can't remember.
I remember, I think this is where we spent a lot of time talking about lot coverage. And I was trying to go back. I don't know if there's, were these the comments we generated?
We check the downtown ordinance against this if it was inadvertent, because this, if there is any difference, it was inadvertent.
Well, there are some other differences. I think there's some building height
differences too, yeah.
And I'm trying to look back at the notes that we had. Yeah, so this was our comment. Please clarify whether lot coverage refers only to structures per code definition or to all impervious surface, as there seems to be inconsistency between lot coverage and pervious surface minimum in table. I think that was our comment. And then we also, had building height maximum is 6 stories in DM, and max height should be 80 in DM and 50 in DM edge.
What may have happened is this had been in draft form for a while, so there was an effort to go in and make sure that it was. This might be, I think this is an oversight, to be honest with you. I'm glad you caught it, and we'll go back and look at the adopted ordinance just to make sure this matches, because that was the intent. And if I think you're right that if there's some mistakes in here, we'll make sure to clean that up, because it should not be different.
Yeah, okay.
But thank you for catching that.
Yeah, somebody could maybe just go back, check it. And I did not do this. I was looking back at the actual document that we reviewed. I did not go back to the comments that were in the minutes from the following meeting they were actually the meetings of February 20th to just back check. But somebody that's a pretty quick administrative type things that could be done, I would think.
Well, the appropriate thing was to actually see what council adopted, right?
Well,
and
even better.
And compare that to this, and they should match. So if they don't, that's a problem. So.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'm looking at the version that council adopted, and it looks like it's the same that's represented here, except for the edge. Let's see. The edge height, 48 feet. No, that's the same too.
Okay. So they kicked it down a little bit.
Yeah. So Dan, how'd that how did that change between the version that was distributed?
What was changed? The maximum height and what else?
Evidently lot coverage too. I'm sorry, I don't have the documents in front of me, but I'm told it's been lot coverage and height compared to what was distributed to P and Z versus what was adopted in the ordinance.
Yeah, what we reviewed with what P and Z reviewed had lot coverage in it. We raised the question about lot coverage. And then what we reviewed had a different building height, and we had proposed new building heights, and they're close to what we proposed.
Yeah, they're
Was changed. The document was changed between when the version you had, and then based on the comments, it was changed and then provided to council. Right. So I don't know that the version that you guys have is different than what went to council because it was changed based on P and Z's comments.
right, but
Yeah, this is going to take us a little bit of time to do some little background investigating and look at the timeline and what comments were made and what may have happened. I don't have an answer for that now. What they're showing here looks like the version that council adopted, but we'll have to do some background to see what and how things changed.
Okay.
yeah, I seem to recall what you said, Dan, that there was really only the two items that they had, but admittedly, I don't think I've participated in the meeting that they went through the whole thing again. So I think it's something, either you guys or the consultant can be able to back check that pretty quickly. So.
Oh yeah, and if it's wrong, we can fix it, take it back.
Right.
And we will, because as you remember, it went right from P and Z to council. So it wasn't really time to tinker with the document a whole lot.
Well, Dan, we did make like the edits based on like 40 different comments between P and Z and council, right? Based on P and Z's comments. So I just don't have those in front of me to know why those changed the way they did. But if somebody made a mistake, we could totally fix it.
Yeah.
All right, anything else on 3-24? So we're coming up on, it's 8:20. Should we push 8:30 and call it an evening? Because I don't see us finishing this for a while.
Well, and a lot of this is again, the downtown, and what I would hope that said is exactly what you guys saw and move forward, but it sounds like there might be some things that are questionable now. So
yeah,
otherwise, this is stuff that you guys have already seen. So the hope is that we just breeze right through the downtown part, but maybe that's not the case. Maybe we pick it back up in 2 weeks.
I think if we could work until 8:30, that would probably be good. If we could get some feedback on this, sort of, because I think we might have a little doubt in our mind. All right, anything 3-25? How about 3-26? (3-27). So I have a comment or a question about on 3-27, bracketed paragraph 2, item B, building shall orient toward the public right of way. And then it says building so above it defines building orientation refers to the location of the primary and secondary facades and entrances to a building. I mean, is that really what we intend, that your entrance always has to be facing to the public right of way.
In downtown?
Is this specifically to downtown?
Yes, this is only in the downtown district.
I always had that question when you look at like the out parcels of Publix, they're forced to open on the street, which is 1792, but there's not one single person that goes around the side. In fact, maybe half those businesses have blocked off their entrance facing the street. So does that always make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, anybody having
page are we on here?
3-27.
327. Anybody like to articulate a comment or suggest a revision?
I mean, I get the intent and what we're saying. I mean, we're wanting the money spent on the building, you know, the orientation, the frontage, and you want to draw people. I guess I'm trying to think through scenarios where you may or may not want that entrance.
Well, I'll tell you, maybe I'm missing it, Keith, but an example that might be of similar where this was not done is over in Winter Park, right on 1792 by Lee Road, where that out parcel from Whole Foods, where there was the Habit and the Mexican place.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No, I hear. I got you. I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah, you know, that's just got kind of a wall that's facing the right of way, and it kind of looks, I don't know. It seemed like it could have been better if there was an orientation towards the public right of way. It would have been the exact same scenario, and I get that maybe it's not as useful, but I think from an aesthetic character standpoint, it kind of just doesn't look good to me.
Well, and I guess to your point, then I think we have several scenarios similar to that. Even in Maitland, those shops that are off the Publix shopping center. So what would you consider, what would you consider those that sort of they're basically their entrance is feeding to the parking lot?
Right.
And is that considered the public right of way?
Yeah. What's considered orient, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, I think the orient is the word.
I feel like, the Francesco's and Olay, while, it's the entrances are there, are towards the back of the parking lot, but when you drive, there is an orientation to those businesses that are facing the front, or facing the public right away. They're facing 1792. And I get, that's how I interpret what that item B is referring to, but maybe I'm missing that.
Dan, what do you think, and Baird, what do you think the intent is? That is would this be saying that, hey, Francesco should have had their entrance toward 1792, or are they considering that?
Now, in a case like Olaya's and the developments there, Jimmy John's or whatever, pedestrians can access it on 1792. There is a front and back entrance on those. Right. And I think the idea is to allow for a pedestrian scale by allowing a ways to access, not just turn everything internal. So the right of ways are looking at the back of a building or a loading area or just, cement block with no windows. If the issue is a little problematic, we can soften it with some language like to the best extent practical, or it shall be oriented towards a road, but they can get DRC to waive that if there's circumstances that don't allow it, or or something like that.
Like Walgreens is another example. Like it faces 1782, but it's just a big giant wall.
Good point.
And it's a horrible facade. And I think our goal is to make us look aesthetically pleasing facing the big public right of way. But the reality of the functions, look at Maitland City Center. There's going to be a couple restaurants in the middle next to Medici going north, and if you only let them open towards 1792, this is the building look is what we're after.
Right.
They can't always be forced to open towards that road.
The language doesn't say you have to open, but it should be oriented that way. In the case of the Francesco's and that shopping center, they can access both, but the idea of building a walkable downtown is to have things up to the street and have a pedestrian accessible shopping area. It's not uncommon that any city that's developing or redeveloping their downtown or revitalizing it, that's a very common practice, is to bring things up to the street, make them pedestrian oriented by putting accesses either on the main street or both, in the case where you can go in the front door and a back door. I don't think it's a bad thing to do. I think it's actually a very good planning principle to do.
Yep. No, 100% agree. It's just sometimes functionality and our walkability hasn't caught up to our end goal.
And it never will if we don't let it, we don't encourage it.
Yep.
This is a random question. Will that affect addressing? So say a business is located on Orlando Avenue and they have a facade on the primary frontage, but their entrance is on the rear, like in Francesco's. Would they receive like an address to where the adjacent street is, or Orlando Ave, where the front door is?
The addressing is controlled by our fire department, and exactly how it's not necessarily wherever the front door is how it's addressed. It's set by the 911.
Right.
So fire trucks and everybody knows where the best way to find it. Right. So I don't think it would have anything. In fact, that maybe it was something we can look into and see, but I don't think it would affect the addressing.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken, this is something that changed in downtown about 10 years ago. So this isn't anything new. I think that it would probably be good, the comparison between Walgreens, which was before this, and then I think the Publix development, where they were forced to, orient with their entrances towards 1792, is probably the difference. So I don't think this is, if I'm not mistaken, I don't think this is introducing anything new. This was like a design principle that was introduced about 10 years ago to downtown in the DMCD.
Okay. Thank you.
Hey, Barrett, would this perhaps benefit from a graphic?
Perhaps. Is there no graphic around it?
Not that I could see. Not specifically.
There's on 329, it kind of has a public frontage standard. I think 329, it's not an exact graphic that represents exactly that, but it talks about public frontage standards and it puts buildings up against pedestrian scale.
I guess I was more thinking of the orientation perspective, I guess. So let me ask a question, and it is, would the development with Francesco's and Jimmy John's, would that be compliant with this requirement?
I think so. I don't know about Francesco's. I think they have an entrance there, but I don't think it's accessible.
I think it is accessible.
Oh, is it? Can you enter from that?
Francesco's isn't, but a couple of the others are.
Jimmy John's and Olay's definitely can.
But
Francesco's has a table in front of theirs
oh, they
inside.
did? Okay. I think at one time it may have been accessible back when it was the pizza place or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely a door there that you can go out. It's just like Glenn said, they have a table there right now blocking it.
All right.
And
But
that's the case. Oh, sorry, that's the case with
Walgreens would not,
Publix
right?
out parcels.
To Glenn's point, Walgreens would not, correct?
Correct. And I think that's the difference in timeline between when that was introduced. It wasn't with the DMZD, because I think that Walgreens was there, but I think the DMZD was updated in between there. So you're right. Walgreens does not comply with the standard, but the shops at Maitland do.
We're past our 8:30, Pete.
We have. All right, should we call it an evening?
Let the record reflect that we made it to 3:27 where we left off.
All right.
Can we get like the council chamber chairs to next time? Just send them to the house.
We will definitely check on it.
Are we adjourned here?
Wait, Glenn, you haven't gotten your compensation check to buy a new chair yet?
Exactly. Oh, yeah.
Maybe next month.
Glenn, I was expecting you to get in that lounge chair back there. I kept waiting. I was watching. I bet if we were going to 9, you would get in there.
It was coming, trust me.
Right.
Although then you guys might hear me snore.
Yeah. Well, I just want to thank you guys. I mean, I think this is a really good discussion, and I'm not going to keep us later, but think about it. If you have feedback about how we want to pick it up in 2 weeks, thanks specifically you, Vice Chair Bennett, for the idea of commenting directly on the PDF. I think that was a really good idea. So stuff like that, if you guys want to suggest changes to the process, by all means, contact me, email, phone, or whatever, and we can. But I think this was real briefly. I think this was a real good, productive discussion, and thanks for your guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Barrett. One thing along that, I think if you could get us some definition on this section of sort of what aligns with where we left off and what's changed, just so that might save us from looking at this even harder now.
Specifically when it gets to the downtown, yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, if you can get that out ahead, in the next week or something, just so we can look at that as part of our continuing.
I have a question before we go to. Do we want to also, read 4 and 10 for next time as well, or be prepared to discuss that, or just 4? 10 is relatively short. 10 is just like rules of measurement, I think, and definitions. So my suggestion would be to, if it's okay with you, it's totally up to you, but if we want to try to tackle those as well and see how far we get.
I just say we make them read the whole thing and keep going until we run out of time.
Yeah, my question was going to be, with what was sent out last week, that we have 1, 3, 4, and 10, right? So we we have the document now.
Correct.
And we'll have a full 2 weeks before we have to comment on it.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. I'll have it reviewed.
All right, we'll keep grinding on it. All right, is there anything else that we need to do, Barrett or Dan, before I call us adjourned?
I can't think of any.
All right.
No, we're good. Sorry, I was switching from the iPad to the phone.
All right, well, we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Nice meeting everybody. Thanks.
Thanks.
Have a great night.